Hey guys, what's going on? This is BJ from Real World Guitar, and today I want to talk about 5 non-musical things that you can do at your next gig to ensure it's the best possible gig that you can have. Let's check it out. All right, so tip number 1, in my opinion, is hands down the most important one of all, and that is simply be on time. I say simple, but for whatever reason, that doesn't seem to be simple for a lot of musicians. Musicians are known to be notoriously late for gigs, for rehearsals, for pretty much everything in life. So one thing you can do right off the bat to set yourself apart from everybody else is just be on time. Take into consideration where the gig is, how far you're going to have to drive, how long it takes you to pack up before you leave, how long it takes you to set up when you get to the venue. This applies for small venues, if you're a solo acoustic act, and it applies if you're a touring band on the road. Most times in that case, you've broken down from the night before, but when you leave this city, how long is the drive? Are you changing time zones? That happens sometimes. You go, oh crap, I didn't realize, now we're an hour ahead or an hour behind. We lost an hour on the drive. Whatever it is, figure out where you're going next, figure out how long it takes to get there, any factors that might influence that, how long you need to set up and or break down, and then add at least an hour to that. Maybe a half an hour if you're, again, a local musician or somewhere, you're playing somewhere close to home. But make sure you are on time. There is no more important thing. All right, so tip number 2 is check out your gear before the gig. So most often this is going to mean going through your cables, your pedals, your mics, your XLR cables, your power cables at home. I keep saying cables because that's most often where the problem lies. But check out your amp, check out your instrument, check out your, if you're playing an electric guitar, you're playing a bass, check out your volume knob or your tone pot. Sometimes those can get scratchy. The worst thing is when you get to a gig and you plug in and all you're getting is a buzzing sound coming out of your amp, or every time you move one way, it starts crackling. It's kind of inexcusable in the sense that you can take care of it ahead of time. So make sure you go through your stuff at home. Depending on how serious you want to get about this, you can do this for every single gig, or if you've got fairly trustworthy gear, you don't have to do it every single time. But definitely don't go too long. You don't want to go months and months without checking out your gear, especially if you're not playing frequently. If you're playing all the time, you're kind of doing this check on the fly. But if you've got a gig this week and then the next gig on your calendar isn't for 7 weeks, then you need to go through that stuff and set it up. And sometimes it really means setting up your entire gear. If you're an acoustic player, set up your PA at home, play through it. You don't have to play a whole set, but get your guitar plugged in, get your vocals plugged in. Make sure everything works, make sure nothing's buzzing, nothing's crackling, and if it is, figure out what it is and address it before you get to the gig. It will help, I promise. All right, so tip number 3, I'm just going to call space. And what I mean by that is the rule for you is going to essentially be take up the least amount of space that is reasonably possible. Now, this could be a lot of different things. If you're playing a big stage, you may have a huge area on your side of the stage, in which case a big pedal board, maybe a half stack, that might be appropriate. Now, if you're playing the little bar up the street, I would not bring that same thing. I would probably, if you're lucky enough to have both, maybe bring a smaller condensed pedal board, or maybe you don't even bring a pedal board. Maybe you just got 1 or 2 pedals that you've got, a dedicated power supply for those, and you can plug them in and keep your space small. If we want to use the cool buzzword, keep your onstage footprint as small as it can possibly be. This does a couple things. One, it's nice for the venue. If you're playing a smaller venue, you might not even have a stage that you're setting up on. So if you're on the floor, if you're near customers, the venue wants music, but they don't want you to spill over into the tables, into the bar. They want you to be as tucked away as you can be reasonably. So you're helping them out by staying back from, where they're doing their business. In addition to that, you're helping your bandmates. So, if everybody else is doing a pretty good job staying in their area, and, they brought the appropriate gear for the gig, and you lug in this, 3-tiered pedal board, and you're all over the singer and you're like backed up into the drummer. It's not good. It's never going to work out for you. So make sure your gear is appropriate for where you're playing, for whichever venue you might be playing, and very specifically, take up the smallest amount of space that you possibly can. The other thing I'd like to talk about a little bit in regards to this is not exactly space, but it kind of falls under space management, or kind of keeping your area clean. And for me, this has to do with cables. There's a couple things. One of the first things you want to do when you get to, especially a new venue, is take a look around, see if you can find out where the outlets are. Where are you drawing power from? Then, where are you on stage? And also maybe where is your amp? Where is your PA? Where are things going to be powered up? Where are they going to be set up? And then you want to do your best to minimize cables running all over the stage. If you have a pedal board, it's nice because you can just have one cable out. You want to do your best to kind of run it around the outside of the stage as opposed to right down the middle where you might trip over it or the singer might trip over it. So with that, you essentially want to keep your cables as clean as possible on stage, which ultimately means as much as possible running them around the outside or the perimeter of the stage as opposed to right down the middle. Properly wrap your cables at the end of a night, because when you go to use them the next time, you don't want them all kinked up and fall like bent and looking all nasty. You want them to work and you want them to go where you want them to. So again, run the perimeter of the stage. If you need a little bit of tape to tape them down, feel free to do that. Some places you might not, but if you're playing, maybe you're playing a wedding gig, maybe you're playing a corporate gig. Some of these places are real high-end function halls. There's an insurance issue or insurance liability for the person hiring you in that case. So they don't want to see cables laying all over the place. They want it to look clean. And it's important because you don't want one of their clients or someone that shows up at this party to be tripping over things and then the band caused a big issue. So it's easy. Just keep your cables as clean as possible. Like I said, run them around the perimeter of the stage, keep them taped down when need be, and just make it as clean as possible. It will make things a lot easier. All right, so tip number 4 is everyone's favorite, volume. All right, so we all know the old adage, if it's too loud, you're too old. And that is mostly true, but you've got to be respectful as a musician of the environment you're in, the venue you're playing, and the other musicians on stage. So, by talking about volume, this could mean a lot of different things. If you're playing a huge room, if you're playing a hall that seats 1,000 people, you can turn up a little bit on stage. You don't have to have your little Fender Deluxe on half or on 1. You can crank up a little bit and you've got some room to work. But if you're playing the small brewery up the street or you're playing a coffee house, you never want to have, especially like an electric guitar at that volume, but even an acoustic. You see a lot of players playing in bars at night, and sometimes it's overkill. It's unbearable. That said, don't be afraid. Don't turn down so much that no one can hear you, and you don't want to be super timid and quiet in the corner and not be able to play. The whole key is finding the appropriate volume for the venue you're at. You want the clientele to enjoy it. If you're at a bar and you're essentially background music, you don't need to be cranking, but people still should hear you, so you don't want to be off. You want to find that volume where people can still have a little bit of a conversation, but they can hear your music well at the same time. If you are playing at a more music-oriented venue, if you're playing at a club, it's got a dedicated stage, it's got a big room, then turn up. You are the focus. People are specifically here for you in that case, so there's nothing wrong with turning up. That said, everybody in the band needs to be on the same page. Ultimately, the overall mix is the most important thing. You need a good mix of your instruments, and you need the vocalist to be able to get over the top of that cleanly. If you're a guitar player, that might mean your clean and your rhythm channels are a little bit lower, and when it comes time to take a solo, you've got a boost that brings you up there, but you don't want to be there the whole time. You want to set a foundation for everything else to sit on top of, and then have something like a boost pedal or a clean boost that can get you over the top when you need to pop out a little bit more. Same thing, bass players. Big, thick, fat bass sounds phenomenal. So you should have some volume there. Don't be timid, don't not turn up at all, but you also don't want to be so loud that every time like you hit the low E, you're shaking the table way in the back. especially if it's like a small restaurant or something like that. You've got to play what's appropriate for the venue you're at. So again, think of this as being respectful to the other musicians in your band on stage. You guys are trying to work together to create the ultimate mix. You know, you don't want the night to go on and everybody be cranking the amp a little bit more, like, oh, you know, I want to be a little louder than the other guitar player. My solos aren't cutting through. So after the sound guy gets everything set, then you go bump your amp up a little more. Don't be that guy. Don't do it. You know, respect your fellow musicians and also respect the audience wherever you're at. You know, if they're there for a big rock show, hell yeah, turn up, crank it, like get some. But if you're at a small place and you're just kind of the background or the adjacent music to whatever's going on, make it appropriate for the venue you're playing at. All right, so the fifth and final tip here is respect the staff wherever you're at. Now, this could mean a lot of different things. Again, we've talked about some different venues. If you're playing a bar, a restaurant, a brewery, a smaller venue, you know, this is going to be waiters, waitresses, bartenders. If you're playing a big rock show, or heck, if you're playing an arena, you know, if you've got somewhere that's got catering and backstage and roadies and stagehands, the staff might look very different from venue to venue, but the truth is everyone is here to help you out, to make sure the show goes off well. And you are here to do the same thing. So you need to be appreciative of everybody that's kind of on that team, helping you out along the way. And like I said, if you're playing a restaurant, a bar, a brewery, you know, maybe you're getting paid, but maybe you get a few beers or some food on the house. Don't take advantage of it. Have a couple, maybe, if you want, get a small meal, get a beer or two, but don't order 10 beers and then 6 meals to go and then everybody gets something for their wife to go. And no, be appropriate, and also this ties into another thing. Don't get lit on stage. Just don't, you don't want to be hammered and make a fool out of yourself, especially at a new venue, but you don't want to do that anyways. But whatever you're doing, respect the people who are working for you. I'm always fond of leaving a tip if I'm at a bar or a brewery, and it's funny, a lot of times the wait staff will say, oh, come on, you don't have to do that. But it's the same thing. Even if I'm not paying for that food or that beer, they're still waiting on me. They're still doing their job. They're still working hard. So everywhere you go, you want to leave a good tip for the staff who's taking care of you. Again, as you're playing at bigger venues, it might not necessarily be a tip, but thank people. If you've got roadies, if you've got stagehands, if you've got people helping you take your gear, sometimes the mid-sized venues, people will show up and they'll help you get gear out of your van. They'll take it to the stage for you. Don't take that for granted. Thank them. It doesn't mean you have to sit and have a 10 or 15 minute conversation with everyone along the way. But again, these people are working extremely hard to make sure your show goes off well. So take the time to at least thank them. Everybody, we're all working hard. We're all in it together. So be good to the people around you. Respect the staff. Like I said, leave a tip if that's the appropriate venue. If you're in a bar, you're in a restaurant, you're in a brewery. If you're in a little bit of a larger place, just give some honest thanks or have a small chat with some of the people who are working there. Somebody who's back in catering, somebody who's in the green room coming through. Just be good to the people around you. It's kind of a good life lesson in general, but it applies in a big way when it comes to music. So respect everyone in the staff around you. All right, guys, so here's a quick recap of the 5 non-musical things you can be doing at your next gig to make sure it goes as well as it possibly can. The first, and this is just a good life lesson, be on time. The second, check your gear in advance. Don't wait till you get to the gig to find out something's gone wrong. Check out your gear before you get there and make sure that it's all in good working order. The third was space, and our rule was you take up the least amount of space that is reasonable for the gig that you're playing. Kind of in conjunction with that, we talked about cable management and making sure that you create some clean lines, keep them around the outside of the stage as much as possible, keep them taped down if need be, but keep a clean and tight space as much as you possibly can. Number 4, everybody's favorite, is volume. Again, we need it. We're musicians. We want to play. We want it to sound good, and there's nothing wrong with some volume. You want to play, but make sure, again, it's appropriate for the venue that you're at. A small coffee house or a brewery is going to be significantly different than the 1,000-seat club, than the 15,000-seat arena. There's a lot of difference there. So just make sure your volume is appropriate for the venue you're playing, And have respect for your other musicians, the other guys or girls in your band. Don't compete for volume. Make sure you guys are all working for the same ultimate goal, a good mix and a great sounding show. And then fifth, respect the staff. Respect anyone that you're working with. Again, another really good life lesson, but it is super important. And sometimes if you're hurrying to a gig, or you're trying to get things done, or you're packing up quickly, or you're setting up quickly, it's easy to forget that there's a lot of people behind you that are working to get that show off and make things sound as good as they possibly can and make sure your night goes as smoothly as it possibly can. So first and foremost, just don't be a jerk. Be nice to those around you. But if you can, take some time. Thank the people that are working directly with you. Have a little chat with somebody. If it's a bar, if it's a restaurant, leave a tip if they're taking care of you, if they're getting you drinks, if you're getting food. It seems like a small thing, but it really goes a long way. So make sure you're respecting the people around you. With that said, those are the 5 non-musical things that I think will improve every single gig that you play. Let me know what you think. If you do these already, if you've got any that you would add to the list, or if there's any that were new to you and you're like, oh man, I should maybe start doing that. Leave some comments below. Let me know what you think, and we will see you next time around.